Imagine this, a country completely ripped apart by 100 years of nonstop war. Powerful warlords called daimyo are just carving up the land in this bloody, endless cycle of ambition and backstabbing. That was Japan in the 16th century. They called it the Sengoku period, the age of warring states. Out of all that chaos, one man would rise up to conquer almost all of it. But he was anything but your typical hero. This is his story. And the big question we're tackling today is this. How on earth did a guy known everywhere as the Fool become the first great unifier of Japan? To get how he did it, we've got to meet the man himself, Oda Nobunaga. And we have to start with the seriously bizarre reputation he had long before he was famous. Now, when you think of Nobunaga, this is probably the image that comes to mind, right? Powerful, confident, the ruthless ruler who basically bent Japan to his will. He looks every bit the part of a formidable warlord. But before he was the unifier, and way before he was the Demon King, he was known all over his home province by a very different name, the Fool of Owari. And let me tell you, he earned that nickname in the most spectacular ways. As a young guy, he just had zero respect for his high status. He'd run around in mismatched clothes, people saw him dancing in women's outfits in taverns, and he'd even chow down on melons while riding his horse backwards. But the final straw? At his own father's funeral, he walked up and threw the ceremonial incense right at the altar. To the traditional samurai class, he wasn't just an embarrassment. He was a fool, dangerously unfit to lead anyone. And see, that's the thing. This reputation as a total fool, it made everyone underestimate him. And that was their first and last mistake. Because under that weird exterior was a brilliantly ruthless mind, which he first aimed squarely at his own family. His takeover was just incredibly fast and brutal. After his dad died in 1551, a power struggle kicked off, but Nobunaga didn't even blink. He systematically took down a rival uncle, crushed his own brother's rebellion, and then, when that same brother plotted against him again, Nobunaga faked an illness to draw him in and had him executed. By 1559, the Fool had wiped out all his rivals and was the undisputed master of his province. But being the master of one little province didn't mean much. A way bigger threat was heading his way. The powerful warlord Imagawa Yoshimoto was marching his huge army toward the capital, Kyoto, and Nobunaga's small territory was sitting right in his path. Yoshimoto's army was an absolute juggernaut. We're talking 25,000 men, one of the biggest armies of the time. And Nobunaga's army? A tiny fraction of that. Maybe 3,000 soldiers, if he was lucky. The odds weren't just bad, they were basically impossible. So his advisors were panicked. They begged him to just barricade himself in his castle and wait for a siege. Nobunaga said no way. The Imagawa army, feeling cocky after a recent win, had set up camp in a narrow-gorged party. And right then, a massive thunderstorm rolls in. Nobunaga saw his chance. He led his tiny force on a dead sprint, using the storm as cover. They smashed right into the enemy headquarters and killed Imagawa Yoshimoto himself. Without a leader, that massive army just fell apart. This was the crazy, impossible victory that made him a legend. That victory lit a fuse. Nobunaga's ambition just exploded. It went from simply trying to survive to wanting to conquer everything. He came up with a new motto, a mission statement for unifying all of Japan. And to announce this new goal to the world, he created a personal seal. He started stamping it on all his official documents after a big conquest in 1567. The meaning behind it was direct and, frankly, terrifyingly clear. Tenka Fubu. All the world by force of arms. That's it. No negotiations. Japan was going to be unified by his military might, period. And he wasn't just taking over territory, he was tearing down the old system. In 1573, he kicked out the shogun, who was supposed to be the most powerful military leader in Japan, ending a dynasty that had been around for more than 200 years. Just like that, Nobunaga was the real ruler of central Japan. His path of conquest was just relentless. He went after his biggest rivals one by one. The Azai and Asakura clans, former allies who turned on him, were completely destroyed, their leaders forced to commit suicide. The mighty Takeda clan, famous for its cavalry, got crushed at the Battle of Nagashino. That's where Nobunaga pioneered this tactic of using rotating volleys of gunfire from huge groups of musketeers. By 1582, the Takeda were just gone. His campaigns were a methodical, innovative, and brutal process of elimination. But this unification came at a horrifying price. The Fool of Owari was long gone. In his place was a figure whose methods would earn him a much, much darker title. His very presence, symbolized by this iconic armor, became a byword for terror. His policy of tenka fubu meant that anyone, and I mean anyone, soldier or civilian, who stood in his way would be absolutely crushed. And for Nobunaga, nothing was sacred. In 1571, he turned his anger on the powerful warrior monks of the Enryakuji monastery on Mount Hiei. They had decided to help his enemies, so Nobunaga decided to make an example of them that the rest of Japan would never forget. He didn't just beat their army. He surrounded the entire mountain and burned the massive temple complex to the ground. An eyewitness account says it all. The whole mountainside was a great slaughterhouse, and the sight was one of unbearable horror. Monks, regular folks, women, children, they were systematically hunted down and killed. And Mount Hiei wasn't a one-off, not even close. He fought a brutal 10-year war against the Ikkō-ikki, a powerful Buddhist sect. In one siege, he literally set their fortress complex on fire, killing tens of thousands of men, women, and children inside. It was this kind of absolute, total ruthlessness that earned him his most infamous nicknames, the Demon Daimyo and the Demon King of the Sixth Heaven. So, how do we make sense of this? The man who massacred thousands is also the man who ended a century of chaos. That's the heart of his really complicated legacy. By 1582, at the absolute peak of his power, Nobunaga had done what nobody thought was possible. He'd conquered most of Japan's main island, Honshu. But his revolution wasn't just about war. He opened up free markets, got rid of tolls to boost trade, and started land surveys that would become the basis for a whole new tax system. He broke that century-long cycle of war and laid down the economic and political groundwork that his successors would build on to finally create a unified Japan. Even though his own end came from a betrayal, the path he had carved out was irreversible. He was a visionary and a monster, a unifier and a destroyer. He brought peace through unimaginable violence. And that leaves us with one final, tough question. Can a nation that was forged in so much fire ever really escape its brutal origins?